Hey guys, tonight we drift into a candlelit chamber where the air smells faintly of beeswax and spiced wine. Outside, a rooster crows in the gray dawn, and inside, you open your eyes beneath embroidered silk sheets. A crown might rest on a velvet cushion across the room, but right now your hair is sticking up in directions no medieval portrait ever bothered to capture. This is the life of a king, and yes, it looks glamorous from a distance, but you probably won't survive this. Between plague outbreaks, assassination attempts, and indigestion from last night's goose stuffed with figs, your odds are slimmer than a monk's dinner portions. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, because you might fall asleep during this story, and share only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and the time you're listening in the comments. I always find it fun to know where my sleepy travelers are joining from. Now, turn off the lights and lie down on your chair or bed, and let's begin tonight's journey together. The first shafts of daylight filter through narrow, stained glass slits in the stone wall, painting your chamber with patches of red, green, and blue. You stretch, your body cocooned in linens that were imported, probably from Italy if your treasurer isn't lying again. A medieval king's morning is not exactly yours. You don't roll over and hit snooze. Instead, you have attendants who sweep into the room, their footsteps muffled by rushes scattered on the floor. They bow low, as though you'd actually look terrifying with bedhead. One servant presents a basin of cold water. It's icy enough to wake you up better than any modern espresso. You dip your hands, splash your face, and for a second you almost regret not being a simple farmer, where mornings are less dramatic. But then again, farmers don't get to eat roast swan for breakfast. Historians still argue whether kings genuinely followed elaborate daily rituals, or if some accounts are exaggerated by chroniclers eager to impress future readers. What we do know is that kings of the Middle Ages often had highly ceremonial mornings. You're not just waking up, you're being displayed, even if your audience is a half-asleep chamberlain holding your slippers. The weight of the crown may not be on your head yet, but you feel it pressing on your chest already. Decisions await, taxes to be set, wars to be avoided or provoked, letters from distant dukes begging for favors. For a brief moment, though, you let yourself enjoy the warm bedding. Silk was rarer than hen's teeth in some kingdoms, but you have it because you're, well, you. That, and because last year you imposed a trade tariff high enough to fund a dozen monasteries, or, more truthfully, your personal comforts. Servants open the shutters, and the cool morning air rushes in. The castle around you groans awake. In the courtyard below, horses snort, chickens scatter, and someone is yelling about missing barrels of ale. You smile. Nothing says royal authority, like people panicking before you've even had breakfast. Still, your body isn't thrilled. Remember that roast swan? Turns out it doesn't sit well when paired with spiced claret and honey cakes. Medieval kings weren't exactly nutrition influencers. They ate to impress, not to stay slim. You pull yourself upright, and an attendant drapes a fur-lined robe around you, even though the season doesn't quite demand it. Display is everything. Even in private chambers, appearances matter. You glance at the crown resting nearby, its jewels winking smugly in the light. Funny thing, crowns were heavy, sometimes nearly 10 pounds. They weren't meant to be worn all day, despite paintings showing otherwise. Your neck would ache faster than a modern gamer's after a 12-hour marathon. Instead, it sits as a symbol, a reminder that you're more than a man. You're an institution. At least that's what everyone keeps telling you, usually right before they ask for money. Servants step forward with garments, hose, tunic, a richly embroidered surcoat. Dressing is not something you do alone. Each layer symbolizes status, from imported fabrics dyed with expensive pigments to subtle designs showing your heraldic crest. You mutter something sarcastic under your breath about being a walking tapestry, but nobody dares laugh, except the jester, who is probably hiding somewhere waiting to pounce on your mood with a joke about your socks. Ah, yes, socks. Or rather, long woolen hose that itch like mad. You resist the urge to scratch because nothing says fearsome monarch like wiggling your legs mid-ceremony. A belt is fastened, heavy with a jeweled dagger you're unlikely to ever draw yourself. Kings were more likely to die of overindulgence or suspiciously spiced wine than in combat. But the dagger looks good, and that's the point. Once dressed, you move toward a small chapel chamber where a priest mumbles morning prayers. Sometimes you wonder if he's more worried about your soul or his stipend. Either way, you nod at the right times, pretending deep reflection while secretly planning what excuse you'll use later to avoid another council meeting. It's still early, and the corridors of the castle echo with footsteps of servants hurrying about. Some carry trays of bread and cheese, others sweep ashes from last night's hearth fires. You notice one carrying what looks suspiciously like a jug of ale. Yes, at this hour. Remember, water wasn't always safe to drink, so even breakfast could involve beer. Talk about a breakfast of champions. As you stride through the corridors, tapestries on the walls depict battles your ancestors supposedly won. You know at least one of those was more of a draw, but no one likes to hang mediocre outcome on the walls. The scent of baking bread teases your nose. Perhaps the best part of being a king is having bakers who start before dawn just so you can tear into a fresh loaf. But here's the quirky tidbit of the morning. Medieval kings sometimes used astrologers to guide their day. Imagine needing to check your horoscope before signing off on a tax edict. Mars is in retrograde? Sorry, peasants, no relief from famine today. You shake your head, amused by the idea, even though you secretly keep an almanac tucked away. By now, your court is stirring. Nobles prepare to present themselves, each hoping to gain favor before the day officially begins. You steel yourself, because mornings for you aren't about relaxation. They're about performance. Even when you're just waking, you are already the stage on which the play of politics unfolds. And yet, beneath the robes and crowns, you're still human. You fight sleepiness, hunger, and sometimes loneliness. The life of a king begins not with freedom, but with ritual and weighty expectations. As you head toward the grand hall, where breakfast and the first round of courtiers await, you sigh quietly. Somewhere in the distance, a lute strums, the soundtrack of your morning, reminding you that before the night brings its whispered temptations, you must survive the daylight of responsibility. The hall is already humming by the time you arrive, though you'd like to believe the world should pause until you've taken your seat. Long wooden tables groan under the weight of trenchers, bowls, and pitchers, and the air is thick with the aroma of roasting meat, spiced stews, and fresh bread. Morning feasts for a king are not delicate affairs of fruit and yogurt. They are theatrical performances where abundance equals power. You settle into the carved chair at the high table, a seat taller and wider than anyone else's, and immediately a servant lays a napkin across your lap. Another pours you a cup of watered wine. It's still early after all, and no one wants a tipsy king trying to decree new tax laws before noon. Well, not today anyway. A platter of roasted capon arrives first, its skin glistening with herbs and butter. Beside it, trenchers of bread, so thick and stale they serve more as plates than food. You tear into one, knowing that by day's end, your scraps will be passed down to dogs or the poor who linger outside the castle gates. It's both generous and stingy at the same time, an economy of leftovers. Historians still argue whether this redistribution was true charity or just convenient waste management, but either way, the peasants didn't complain about free gravy-soaked bread. Across from you, nobles begin to murmur, eyes darting as they lean close to one another. The morning feast is never only about food. It's where alliances are reinforced, rivalries spark, and whispers set the tone for the day's politics. You chew slowly, pretending not to notice the sidelong glances, though your ears catch every fragment of conversation. The Duke's lands are failing. The bishop grows restless. The Queen's cousin visits soon. Each word carries the weight of potential upheaval. The jester naturally chooses this moment to clamber up on a bench, juggling apples like it's the height of entertainment. One falls, splattering against the floor. He bows dramatically, and the hall erupts in laughter. Anything to cut through the tension. You allow yourself a chuckle, even if you know the fool is not just a clown. He's a safety valve, easing the pressure before someone decides the best way to impress you is by insulting their rival to your face. Another servant brings you a slab of cheese, sharp enough to wake the dead, followed by honeycomb dripping golden syrup onto your plate. It's indulgence, pure and simple. You pop a piece into your mouth, savoring the sweetness, and muse on how medieval monarchs were essentially living the influencer lifestyle before it was cool. Endless displays of luxury, carefully curated moments of generosity, and always an audience watching. Quirky fact of the morning, some kings kept exotic pets, lions, leopards, even polar bears. Imagine trying to explain to your peasants who are gnawing on boiled turnips why you have a bear splashing in your moat. But hey, if nothing else, it makes your castle harder to break into. Conversation swells as dishes pile higher. Lords and ladies try to edge closer to your table, hoping for a word, a glance, even a grunt of acknowledgement. One leans in a little too eagerly, whispering about his neighbor's questionable loyalty. You raise an eyebrow, neither confirming nor denying your interest. In truth, these tidbits are as seasoned as your food. Everyone spices the truth to make it more palatable. Your gaze drifts to the far end of the hall, where a troupe of musicians strikes up a tune. Lutes and shawms weave a melody that mingles with the chatter. The rhythm is pleasant. Though one minstrel looks half asleep, you sympathize. Mornings aren't for everyone, but when you're a king, you don't get to complain. Historians debate whether medieval breakfasts were this grand, or if they were reserved for high feast days. Some argue that kings typically ate later, merging breakfast and lunch into a single massive meal. But the chronicles describing royal mornings often emphasize opulence, whether or not every day was truly a banquet. As with most history, the truth lies somewhere between reality and propaganda. At your signal, servants pour more wine. This time, not so watered down. The hall grows louder as nobles loosen their tongues, fueled by both liquid courage and the knowledge that you're watching. Rivalries flare subtly. A barbed comment here, an exaggerated laugh there. You sip slowly, letting them reveal themselves. Being king is half politics, half performance, and this morning feast is your stage. You lean back, the chair creaking beneath the weight of both your body and your authority. The courtier's eyes flit toward you, waiting for reaction, approval, or displeasure. Sometimes, you think they hang on your fork more than your sword. One wrong word, one careless glance, and tomorrow the whispers could turn against you. And yet, amid the politics and the theater, you enjoy the simplest pleasure. The crunch of fresh bread, the warmth of honey, the saltiness of cheese. For a fleeting moment, it feels almost ordinary, as if you were just another person sharing a meal. But then someone bows too low, spilling ale at your feet, and the illusion vanishes. The feast winds down, and with it, the noise softens. Servants sweep away platters, dogs scurry in to lick scraps from the floor, and nobles excuse themselves to prepare for the business of the day. You dab your lips with a cloth, rising slowly, every movement calculated. Even standing up is political. It shows you are ready to face the burdens waiting beyond the hall. As you walk out, you can't help but smirk. Breakfast may have been decadent, but it was also a battlefield in disguise. And you, crowned or not, were the general presiding over both food and intrigue. You step from the great hall into a corridor where tapestries breathe with the draft, and the castle's pulse shifts from clatter to whisper. Courtiers hover like silk moths about a candle flame, careful not to singe their reputations while orbiting yours. You keep an even pace, unhurried, unbothered, and entirely aware that every eye checks your face like a weather vane. Smile, and petitions bloom, frown, and someone will blame you for next week's rain. Your chamberlain clears his throat and sings the daily litany of names. Ambassadors, bishops, envoys, cousins who are only cousins when they want something. You nod to the rhythm, the way a drummer taps before the march. Here, courtly intrigue unfurls, not in shouts, but in honeyed syllables. Not in swords, but in sentences designed to slip past armor and lodge in favor. A scribe shadows you with ink-stained fingers, clutching a ledger heavy enough to stop an arrow. He records who bows, who hesitates, who feigns surprise. A lady in peacock blue drifts near, praising the tapestry hung with your crest. You thank her, resisting the urge to note that the weaver has given your charger the expression of a worried sheep. You save the joke. Right now, you need her to keep talking. History. Fact for the morning. Many realms relied on a privy council, small groups of trusted advisors who shaped policy before anything reached a public assembly. You convene yours in an oak-paneled chamber. The door closes, and the tone shifts from polite theater to practical calculus. Grain levies, fortifications, coin shortages. A baron sends a cart of wine, which means he wants justice delivered faster than the wine evaporates. Your chancellor presents letters sealed in wax, each a capsule of ambition. One smells faintly of cloves. Quirky tidbit, courtiers often carried pomanders, citrus fruit studded with cloves, to sweeten the air and, they hoped, ward off disease. Your courier now smells like a festive bakery. You crack the seal. Inside, a marriage scheme for your niece, a promise of 50 lances, a rumor that your neighbor's harvest has failed. The words wear perfume and teeth. You let advisors argue like hawks and doves on a branch. Historians still argue whether royal decisions were truly top-down or whether kings rode the momentum of their strongest counselors. You play the weather, a nod here, a request for detail there. A pause so long, the room rethinks itself. Power is not a trumpet, it's gravity. People fall toward it. A messenger kneels, dust on his boots. A count has drifted toward your rival after a very public feast and a very private conversation. You keep your face still. Inside, you move chessmen. If desserts buy allegiance, you will out-honey them all. Friendly reminder to the kitchens. Perfect sugared almonds, and do it yesterday. You pause by a window slit. Below, the town bends around the castle like a river around rock. Market tents bloom. Smoke lifts. A bell counts the hour. Reputation is a cloak you wear whether it fits or not. Today, it must fit. Back in the chamber, the bishop glides forward, rings catching firelight. He praises your prudence with compliments so polished you can see yourself in them. Then comes the price, confirm lands for his cathedral. Churches are allies and referees. Give too much, nobles scowl. Give too little, sermons sharpen. You grant a portion and his expression recalibrates from hunger to gratitude. From the doorway, the master of revels coughs as if he has wandered into the wrong war council. He has not. Tonight's entertainments need approval. A mask, musicians, perhaps a torch-lit display of falcons. Festivity oils diplomacy. If the court feels lively, rumors spin in your favor. If it turns dour, whispers harden into plots. You approve the mask and add a note. Elegant, not lewd. A page announces the envoy from the northern duchy. He enters wrapped in fur, eyes quick, smile cautious. Gifts, saltfish for Lent, and a brass astrolabe that gleams like a pocket sky. He speaks of friendship in phrases ironed smooth by rehearsal, then proposes a trade pact to redirect tolls through his lord's river port. You ask about roads, bridges, bandits, winter freeze. He answers well. You offer provisional terms and schedule another meeting. Since you like a good debate at bedtime, courtly love. Troubadours in the 12th century sang a stylized code of refined affection that orbited marriage, yet claimed to ennoble behavior. Was it real practice or poetic costume? Historians still argue whether those verses guided conduct or simply furnished dreams for listeners who preferred lutes to lawsuits. Either way, the language of courtesy perfumes everything here. Even a threat arrives wrapped in a compliment. By midday, intrigue accumulates like wax on a candle. Your scribe's ledger bulges with notes, arrows, and a marginal doodle that suspiciously resembles the jester being chased by a goose. You pause for bread and watered wine. Your stomach thanks you for not choosing Swan, the sequel. Someone cracks a window to release the scent of tallow and ambition. Before the afternoon petitions, you retreat to the solar, a bright room where the sun finds you through small panes stitched by lead. Cushions blunt the stone. A harp waits like an extra advisor who only speaks in arpeggios. You allow one joke at your expense. If you disappear for longer than 10 minutes, the nobles will swear you're plotting attacks on haircuts. You return promptly, credibility intact and hair untaxed. Petitions resume. A widow asks relief after fire took her mill. You lower her levy for a year and quietly add coin from your privy purse. The chamber hushes. Mercy, wielded publicly but not flamboyantly, binds faster than fear. Next comes a knight complaining that his neighbor's geese trespass with villainous intent. You resist issuing the Edict of Goose. Instead, you assign an officer to mediate and remind the room that peace begins at the fence and sometimes with a gate. As the light slants toward afternoon, you feel the court's appetite shift from business to spectacle. Alliances have been tested, ambitions priced, masks measured. You straighten your sleeves, gather the day's invisible threads, and give the signal to adjourn. The whispers do not stop. They never do. They merely change rooms. You walk away at an even pace, the moths following the flame. Somewhere, a lute sketches a new melody. In the kitchens, spice jars open like flowers, promising the gentlest argument diplomacy can make. Pleasure without consequence, at least for a night. The council chamber empties, but the ink stains on the table feel like scars from the arguments carved into them. You stand for a moment, letting silence gather in the air, as if to remind everyone, including yourself, that the king's word lingers longer than the chatter of nobles. The decisions of the morning now weigh like stones in your sleeves. Somewhere outside, a falcon shrieks, wings slicing across the sky, and you imagine your decrees taking flight in much the same way. Swift, irreversible, and likely aimed at something unfortunate. You step into a smaller room where scrolls and ledgers tower in precarious stacks. The treasurer waits, face pale, hands wringing as though squeezing coins from air. He unrolls parchment covered with numbers that leap and stumble like drunken soldiers. You frown. Revenues from a distant province have shriveled after bad harvests. Taxes demand to be raised, but you know each coin lifted from the peasants is a straw on their already breaking backs. You sigh, because a king's morning never ends with breakfast. It continues into the arithmetic of human misery. Historians still argue whether medieval kings cared deeply for their subjects' well-being or if compassion was merely another tool of politics. You like to think you care, though the decision-making feels more like choosing which village gets soaked in rain while the others remain dry. Inevitably, someone ends up muddy. A quill scratches, recording your decree to reduce levies in one region and increase them in another. The treasurer bows low, relief spilling from his shoulders. You're not sure whether he's grateful for your wisdom or just thankful he survived the meeting without being blamed. Both are victories, really. A messenger arrives with a sealed letter marked by a red wax crest. You recognize it instantly. It's from your cousin, a count with ambitions too large for his own shoes. The letter drips with courtesy, but quickly slides into demands. More land, more titles, more everything. You read it twice, smirking at the elaborate phrasing that basically translates to "give me stuff." Quirky tidbit here. Medieval rulers sometimes used elaborate letter-writing styles, stacking compliments so high that the request nearly disappeared. A cousin might write, "To the most illustrious, radiant, unparalleled sovereign, whose wisdom illuminates the realm like the sun itself, could you lend me a few castles?" You fold the letter and mutter, "Nice try." The steward interrupts with petitions stacked higher than your crown. A miller claims his lord confiscated grain. A knight insists his rival spread lies about his honor. A monastery requests funds for repairs, though you strongly suspect repairs includes a new wine cellar. You try not to laugh when one noble complains about the scandalous noise of peasants singing after dark. Ah, yes. Heaven forbid happiness trickles into the night. You dispense justice with a calm tone, each decision weighed against loyalty, fairness, and practicality. Too harsh, and you'll be feared. Too lenient, and you'll be mocked. It's a tightrope across the void, and you are the one balancing with a scepter as your pole. Somewhere in the back of your mind you recall the jester's joke that kings are just jugglers who never get to drop the ball. You hate that he might be right. The chamberlain clears his throat. It's time to address foreign envoys. You stride to the audience hall, where banners ripple above and tiled floors echo your footsteps. Ambassadors wait like birds perched on branches, each clutching a gift meant to buy your favor. One presents a cloak of fine wool dyed deep crimson. Another offers silver plate etched with hunting scenes. You accept graciously, knowing gifts are currency disguised as generosity. An envoy from the south bows deeply and mentions a treaty proposal that would guarantee safe trade routes. You nod, acknowledging the importance. Yet in your mind, you're already mapping rivers, forests, and toll stations, wondering who gains more from such a pact. Historians debate whether these treaties were honored or simply used until more convenient betrayals arose. You suspect the latter. Parchment burns faster than loyalty. As the morning drags into early afternoon, your shoulders sag under invisible armor. Every smile hides a request. Every bow conceals a bargain. Power isn't heavy because of the crown. It's heavy because of the eyes staring, calculating, expecting. You breathe deeply, steadying yourself with the scent of beeswax candles and the faint salt from your skin. A cleric steps forward, preaching of sin, reminding you that earthly temptations endanger the soul. You nod solemnly, but you know he's rehearsing his lines for later, when whispers of your nightly escapades reach the church. You file the sermon away, somewhere between well-intentioned and politically dangerous. By now, the petitions have blurred into a single hum, like bees buzzing in your ears. You rise, cutting the air with your motion. The courtiers bow, their voices dropping into reverent silence. You dismiss the assembly, aware that half the nobles will leave grumbling, the other half scheming. Yet your word is final, and that is enough, for now. Walking through the corridor, you glimpse your reflection in a polished shield mounted on the wall. The face staring back is yours, but older, more tired, burdened. You whisper to yourself that this is the cost of ruling. Every decree plants a seed. Some sprout loyalty, others rebellion. You won't know which until the harvest. Still, as you step toward the solar chamber for a brief respite, you can't help but chuckle softly. The jester was right. Kings juggle constantly. And right now, you're keeping castles, taxes, cousins, and geese all in the air at once. The trick is never letting anyone see how close you are to dropping them. The solar grows dim as clouds pass across the sun, and for a moment, the room feels like a hushed chapel. You lean against the window ledge, watching swallows dart above the courtyard. The morning of decrees and petitions lingers in your bones, and yet, in this fragile quiet, something else enters. the faint rustle of whispers that slide like smoke under every door of your castle. Temptation doesn't arrive with trumpets. It creeps in like a rumor. A courtier bows low, slipping into the chamber with the grace of someone who has rehearsed this entrance 1,000 times. He speaks in polished phrases about loyalty, service, and duty. But you hear the undertone, he is not here only to flatter. He mentions the private apartments tucked behind the eastern wing, chambers that rarely appear in official tours, places where politics and pleasure blur. You raise an eyebrow, amused at the thin veil. Castles may be built of stone, but their secrets are softer than down pillows. Historians still argue whether medieval kings maintained actual hidden rooms for amorous encounters, or if later writers exaggerated such tales. Chroniclers certainly enjoyed painting kings as larger-than-life figures, equal parts ruler and libertine. What is certain, though, is that temptation was always near. Courtiers, ladies-in-waiting, visiting envoys, each hoping to weave themselves into your private tapestry of influence. You pace the chamber, pretending indifference, though the suggestion hangs in the air like incense. You recall last night's sermon about sin and damnation, and you smirk. Sin, perhaps, but damnation seems less immediate than the boredom of another council session. Quirky tidbit. One chronicler described a king who allegedly disguised himself to slip out at night, wandering taverns incognito. Was it true or just gossip designed to scandalize? Either way, the story makes you grin. Imagine a monarch haggling over ale prices. The courtier continues, speaking of a select gathering planned for dusk. He paints it as an event of discretion, a gathering where music veils intentions and candlelight forgives indiscretions. You let him talk, all the while noticing how his eyes flicker with the thrill of being messenger to your curiosity. He bows again and departs, leaving the solar quieter but heavier, as though the air itself is conspiring to pull you toward those chambers. You shake off the thought and glance toward the chapel below, where monks chant in solemn rhythm. Their voices rise and fall, a counterpoint to the whispers in your head. That is the paradox of kingship. By day, you are urged to uphold divine justice, and by night, you are invited to indulge human desire. Both duties, in their own way, shape the legend that history will write. A servant interrupts with a tray of figs and almonds, a light refreshment to carry you until evening. You pop a fig into your mouth, savoring the burst of sweetness, and muse on how even fruit feels like temptation in miniature. Figs, after all, were associated with fertility and abundance. Nothing in a king's life is free from symbolism. Even snacks become metaphors. The afternoon creeps forward. Courtiers pass in the corridor, their laughter a little too loud, their glances a little too quick. They, too, know what dusk will bring. Rumors travel faster than pigeons. By now, half the castle has embroidered versions of tonight's gathering, each more elaborate than the last. You retire briefly to your private chamber. There, the crown rests untouched, a glittering reminder that kings are judged not only by battles and treaties, but by what they do when the candles burn low. You run a hand along the cold metal, wondering whether future scribes will emphasize your laws or your liaisons. From the window, you see the horizon glow with approaching sunset. Shadows lengthen across the courtyard. Torches spark to life along the battlements. The castle is shifting, preparing for night. And so are you. You inhale deeply, letting the cool air sharpen your senses. Duty has filled the day. Temptation now waits to fill the night. Whether you walk toward it as sovereign or as man is a question historians will never settle, though they will certainly argue about it. You smile wryly because kings do not step into temptation blindly. They step in knowing the risks, the pleasures, and the stories that will be told long after the candles gutter out. The last threads of sunlight slip behind the battlements, and with them, the castle seems to exhale, trading the bustle of petitions for the softer rhythm of anticipation. Torches sputter to life in iron brackets, their flames licking at the evening air. You feel it immediately, the shift in tone, the unspoken signal that daylight obligations yield to twilight diversions. Dusk has always been the stage where politics wears a mask of velvet. You move through the corridors at an unhurried pace, attendants trailing like shadows. Somewhere, a lute plucks a playful prelude, the notes skipping ahead of you like messengers. The scent of roasted venison and cinnamon drifts from the kitchens, blending with the resinous tang of torch smoke. It is not hunger that stirs in you, though. It is curiosity, sharpened by hours of restraint. Historians still argue whether medieval courts orchestrated such nightly gatherings as structured entertainments or whether chroniclers embellished them to flatter and scandalize. What is certain is that feasts, masques, and revels served a dual purpose: distraction for the restless and a gilded veil for whispered deals. Tonight, both purposes twine together. The master of revels greets you at the threshold of the great hall, bowing with a flourish that nearly knocks the feather from his cap. He lists the entertainments prepared: a troupe of dancers, a masque themed on the virtues, jugglers, and enough musicians to drown out a thunderstorm. You nod, not because you doubt his list, but because you know entertainment is never just amusement. Each act distracts, dazzles, and, if arranged carefully, shields more private exchanges. Inside, the hall blazes with candlelight. Chandeliers drip wax like frozen waterfalls, and every surface gleams with reflected flame. Nobles glide in silks dyed jewel tones: emerald, ruby, sapphire, while servants weave between them bearing goblets of wine already half emptied. The room hums like a hive, conversation buzzing, secrets traded faster than coins at a fair. You take your place at the high table, though already your gaze sweeps beyond the feast. There are patterns in the seating, allies placed near, rivals separated by carefully arranged buffers, potential companions seated within conversational reach. Nothing is random, not even who receives the first slice of venison. The courtier who hinted at this evening's special gathering inclines his head from across the room, his smile the faintest spark of confirmation. The feast begins with toasts, each more elaborate than the last. A noble compares your reign to a lighthouse guiding storm-tossed ships, another to a mighty oak sheltering the realm. You resist the urge to joke that you feel more like the goose on the platter, stuffed and carved up for everyone's satisfaction. Instead, you raise your cup, letting the wine burn warm down your throat. Between courses, entertainers fill the air, acrobats flipping, minstrels strumming, dancers moving in circles that suggest both devotion and desire. A masked performer in gilded robes delivers verses about love's power to tame even kings. The courtiers laugh, though their eyes dart to gauge your reaction. You smile thinly, because you know the mask is never just theater. It's commentary, satire, or even subtle warning dressed as rhyme. Quirky tidbit: in some courts, masks were so elaborate they involved machinery, stages that rotated, gods descending from painted clouds, fountains of wine spurting on cue. Imagine the poor carpenter underneath cranking gears, while nobles above pretend the gods themselves have arrived. Tonight, though, the spectacle is simpler, more intimate. The real performance lies ahead. As the feast winds toward dessert, spiced pears glazed in honey, you sense the hall shifting again. Laughter grows looser, conversations dip into confidential tones, and servants begin discreetly guiding select guests toward side chambers. You remain, lingering just long enough to avoid suspicion before rising. The room bows as you depart, though everyone knows the feast is not ending. It is merely transforming. You follow the torchlit passage eastward, where shadows dance higher than the flames. The stone corridor curves, leading toward chambers less formal, more secret. Music still floats behind you, muffled now like a heartbeat fading into the distance. Ahead, another rhythm waits, the murmur of hushed voices, the crackle of expectation. The door opens, revealing a chamber drenched in candlelight. Silks drape from the rafters, cushions spill across the floor, and the air glows with incense that smells faintly of roses and resin. Laughter bubbles here, softer, edged with anticipation. You step inside, the king shedding his armor of daylight duties, slipping into the costume of night. This is dusk's true gathering, where masks are cast aside, where beauty and ambition twine, where politics lingers in every glance and touch. You smile knowingly, because as much as temptation beckons, you are still the sovereign. Even here, among silks and candlelight, you rule, though the throne has been replaced by a couch, and power by proximity. The small door from the side chamber returns you to the great hall, and the evening doubles in brightness, as if the candles have learned ambition. You move toward the high table with your measured stride, the one that looks effortless but has been rehearsed more diligently than any joust. A hush ripples, then chatter returns with perfume and expectation. Platters advance in procession. The first course murmurs in aromas, roasted venison glossed with wine, river fish with herbs, pies whose lids puff like proud helmets. Trenchers, thick slabs of yesterday's bread, arrive to serve as plates, soaking up sauces the way rumor soaks up meaning. You break a corner, let it drink from a gravy hollow, and the taste steadies you. A cupbearer kneels with a silver ewer. He pours, then, just to assure every anxious eye, sips from your goblet first. That ceremony is part theater, part insurance policy. Mainstream fact for your sleepy library. Courts across Europe kept tasters not only to deter poisoners, but to reassure the audience that the king would see another sunrise. Musicians thread the air with lutes and rebecks. Shawms call from the gallery in voices like bronze geese. The jester appears with the tragic confidence of a man who thinks juggling knives is a personality. He quips about taxes, then claims your crown reflects so much light he can use it to toast bread. You allow a smile. You raise your goblet. The wine is spiced, warm at the edges, its sweetness chased by cloves and cinnamon. Quirky tidbit, pepper and cinnamon traveled farther than most nobles ever would, crossing deserts and seas to land on your tongue. People sometimes locked spices away like jewels or used them as rent. Drinking this, you taste caravans and the treasurer's anxiety. A steward calls the remove, the shift to the next array of dishes, and servants sweep in a choreography that would shame half the minstrels. Peacocks arrive with iridescent skins refitted over roasted bodies, like costumes returning for a curtain call. Historians still argue whether such birds were truly eaten or mostly displayed before being swapped for practical meats. Either way, the message is clear. Your table can afford beauty that doesn't need to justify itself with nourishment. Your neighbors perform a quieter mask. On your right, a young lord laughs with exactly the amount of mirth required to be harmless. On your left, a widow of sharp intelligence registers the political map unfolding in platters and portions. Seating is strategy. Friends nestle within earshot. Rivals are placed where the music fattens their silence. You take small bites, not because you are delicate, but because conversation is the larger dish. Someone asks about forks. You suppress a grin. Scholarly debate time. Historians still argue whether forks were common in the Middle Ages or mainly a later fashion. In many halls, hands, knives, and shared spoons did the work. Etiquette meant not licking the communal spoon as if it owed you money. You demonstrate the kingly compromise, slice neatly, use bread as a modest tool, and never wear gravy as a badge. Between courses, masked dancers tell a parable in silk. Virtue shepherds desire outruns prudence, and all three trip over fortune's hem. It is instructive and, accidentally, hilarious. You laugh softly when fortune's wheel squeaks. Apparently the carpenters oil politics better than props. Light joke 1. You make a note to tax squeaks. Clearly a growth sector. More wine. You temper it with water, a habit that makes the purists blink. Another neat point for the night's fact file. Despite modern myths, water was not uniformly unsafe. Wells, springs, and boiled broths existed, and people mixed and matched. Still, ale and wine were staples, partly for calories and partly because life is improved by a little music in the veins. Light joke 2. You promise to govern in a straight line, even if the hallway starts to curve. Dessert advances like a diplomatic envoy. Marchpane, almond paste, gleams beneath gilded leaves. Cones of sugar rise like white towers. Then comes a subtlety, a sculpted tableau of sugar depicting your arms guarded by lions who look suspiciously like overfed cats. Subtleties announce wealth to the eye the way fanfares announce arrivals to the ear. Your guests applaud. Your treasurer calculates. The jester returns with rhymes, praising your mercy so lavishly you fear drowning in compliments and have to dog paddle to shore. Light joke 3. You award him the Order of Excessive Metaphor and a very small imaginary ribbon. He bows as if it weighs 10 pounds. Conversation thickens in that late course way when people believe words are private because sugar has made them gentle. Promises bake into compliments. No feast rivals yours really means about that border toll. You keep replies soft and smiling, the way a cat keeps claws sheathed until required. A messenger leans near to report that the mask is ready for its coda and the side chambers for quieter talks. You nod, neither eager nor reluctant. Neutrality is your favorite silent costume. Historians still argue whether kings used banquets primarily for largesse or for intelligence. The answer is yes. A feast teaches who blushes at praise, who stiffens at a joke, who watches the door more than the stage. For a moment you simply listen. Trays clink, wax sighs. The band plays a tune that thinks it is a lullaby. The hall smells of rosemary, roast, and warm stone. If daytime made you a statue surrounded by petitions, night makes you a lantern. People move toward you by choice, and in that choosing, they tell you everything. One last cup. Two-piece, you say, and the word does its work, smoothing edges, rinsing the palate of small resentments. Cups rise like a forest of metal leaves. You drink, not deeply, just enough, and set the goblet down with a soft click like a seal pressed into wax. Agreements will be signed tomorrow. Tonight, they are breathed. The steward signals the close of the public feast. Servants begin their graceful dissolution of abundance, wrapping leftovers for the poor outside the gates, for the kennel, for the night shift guards who trade crumbs for stories. You stand, and the room stands with you, a wave that lifts and breaks in a formal bow. You step down from the dais. The wine has warmed courage without untying sense. Behind the tapestry, a corridor beckons eastward, where candles burn lower and voices lower still. You move toward it, your pace easy, your mind clear, your smile unreadable, the king still, and the night just beginning to practice its gentlest arguments. The side corridor narrows as you leave the thunder of the feast behind. The air cools, carrying only the faint echo of music, now muffled like a lullaby sung behind a wall. Torches spit and flicker, their light dragging your shadow long across the stones. A servant glides ahead, opening a carved door that leads into a chamber smelling of sandalwood and beeswax. This is no council hall. It is a stage dressed for secrecy. Inside, the atmosphere hums differently. The chamber is smaller, softer, the walls hung with tapestries depicting scenes of courtly love. Knights kneeling before ladies, falcons exchanged as tokens, ribbons tied around wrists. The symbolism isn't subtle, but then again, medieval courts were rarely subtle. Here, subtlety comes not from decoration, but from discretion. The doors are heavy, the windows shuttered, and the candles placed to flatter, not to illuminate. You enter, and courtiers already gather in a loose circle, their silks whispering against the cushions. They look up, their faces bright with expectation and wine. The laughter quiets just enough for you to feel the shift. Your arrival is the true beginning. All eyes turn, and the evening bends toward you as if you are the hearth around which it must warm itself. One by one, select guests are guided closer. These are not random companions. Each woman chosen has been maneuvered into place like pieces on a chessboard, their beauty matched by lineage, their smiles as much diplomacy as desire. You know their names: daughters of lords seeking favor, nieces of bishops hoping for influence, widows with wealth to trade. To accept their company is to accept an alliance, whether temporary or binding. Historians still argue whether kings genuinely enjoyed these private gatherings or endured them as extensions of politics. Was pleasure authentic, or was it another form of negotiation? Likely both. Tonight, you feel the mixture clearly, the weight of crowns blending with the lure of candlelight. Wine is poured again, spiced and heady. Goblets clink softly, less ceremonious than in the great hall. A court musician plucks at a harp, the melody languid, each note stretching as though reluctant to fade. The laughter of your companions rises, softer now, curved with innuendo. You lean back against cushions, the robe slipping from your shoulder just enough to signal that here, the king is more man than monarch. Quirky tidbit. In some courts, noble ladies competed not just for attention, but for symbolic tokens. A dropped glove, a borrowed ring, even a lock of hair could circulate as proof of intimacy. The castle rumor mill could turn such trinkets into legends overnight. You imagine tomorrow's whispers already being embroidered by eager tongues. As the conversation swirls, politics threads through it like a hidden seam. A lady mentions her father's loyalty, another hints at land disputes, a third praises your wisdom in settling a quarrel last winter. Their words dance on a knife edge between affection and ambition. You listen, smiling, answering gently, knowing each exchange is both flirtation and transaction. The chamberlain discreetly withdraws, leaving only trusted attendants at the door. Privacy, such as it exists in a castle, has been arranged. Still, you're aware that secrecy is a myth here. Everyone knows what happens behind these walls. The only variable is how much the chroniclers will choose to exaggerate. A game begins, casual at first, verses exchanged in rhyme, compliments returned with teasing deflections. Someone dares you to compose a line on the spot, and you oblige, half sincere, half mocking. The chamber ripples with laughter, and in that laughter, barriers fall. Historians debate whether courtly love, this idea of refined, almost spiritual affection, ever truly defined behavior, or whether it was a poetic disguise for more practical arrangements. Tonight, you feel the poetry working as camouflage. Every compliment glitters, but behind it lurks calculation. You sip your wine and glance around. Each face here tells a story, each smile a request. Yet the mood is warm, not predatory. Politics may lurk, but for now, the candlelight softens it, turning ambition into a melody rather than a demand. The harp plays on, fingers tracing strings that seem to echo the heartbeat of the room. You lean forward, lowering your voice as though sharing secrets, and the circle leans with you, caught in the orbit of your tone. It is not decrees or battles that bind them to you now. It is presence, charm, and the unspoken promise that history itself is being woven in these shadows. The chamber thickens with warmth as more candles are lit, their flames bending in tiny arcs, their smoke curling into perfume trails. You take a slow breath and notice the change. The chatter softens, the laughter grows intimate, and the walls themselves seem to lean inward. holding secrets the way stone holds damp. What was once a gathering of courtiers is now something else, a cloister of complicity. Cushions scatter across the floor, embroidered in bright silks, their seams frayed from countless nights like this one. You lower yourself among them, no throne beneath you, no scepter in hand, only velvet and murmured expectation. The air smells of rose oil and beeswax, mixed with a faint trace of cloves burned in a brazier to keep the chill away. A serving girl enters silently with a tray of pomegranates and sugared almonds. She sets them down and bows, retreating without a word, as though even sound might fracture the fragile enchantment. You pluck a ruby seed, its juice staining your fingers, and recall that medieval physicians swore pomegranates strengthened the heart. You laugh softly. Perhaps they meant courage for moments just like this. One companion tilts her head, hair catching the glow, and asks whether you believe the poets who claim beauty is proof of divine favor. You smile, answering that if that is true, your court must be holier than any monastery. The jest ripples through the room, easing the last traces of self-consciousness. Historians still argue whether kings' private chambers were truly spaces of indulgence, or if chroniclers later embroidered them to suit scandal-hungry audiences. Chroniclers, after all, rarely painted kings as moderate. They wanted grandeur, decadence, something to make the parchment sizzle. Tonight, though, you sense how much of the truth is theater. Every movement is both genuine and staged, every glance both affection and calculation. A musician begins to pluck a harp again, this time slower, the notes stretched like candle wax dripping down the stem. The rhythm presses the room into stillness, encouraging whispered conversations. A lady nearby leans close, her perfume sharp with orange blossom. She tells you her uncle is preparing to pledge new levies of men, should you look kindly on her family's petition. You nod, not with promise, but with practiced ambiguity. Quirky tidbit. There's a record of one French king keeping an entire book of favors, listing which noble houses had sent daughters or nieces to court as companions. Whether it was accurate or satire, no one can say, but the idea that intimacy could be catalogued like debts speaks volumes about how politics wrapped itself around pleasure. You laugh at another jest tossed across the cushions. Someone teases you about the bishop's sermon that morning, reminding you that temptation is the devil's favorite bait. You reply that if temptation is bait, then perhaps you are simply a fish resigned to swimming near a very well-stocked river. The room erupts, the tension dissolving in shared humor. Candles flare lower, the chamber glowing with a softer light, more golden than white. The shadows stretch longer, disguising edges and blending forms into gentle shapes. You lean back, a goblet in hand, listening to the harp, to the laughter, to the quiet draw of breath. For a moment, politics recedes. You are not ruler, just participant in a ritual as old as kingship itself, finding warmth, companionship, and brief forgetfulness in the arms of night. And yet, beneath it all, you feel the invisible quills of history scratching. You know tomorrow chroniclers may write of generosity, of indulgence, of scandal. Some will praise your vibrancy, others will scold your sin. But right now, the ink is not yet dry, and the night belongs to you. You close your eyes briefly, letting the music coil around you like a cloak. When you open them, the circle of faces waits, expectant, luminous, and entirely aware that though crowns may be heavy in daylight, tonight they are weightless, set aside among the silks and whispers. The harp's last chord fades into silence, and the hush feels deliberate, like the pause before a confession. You lift your goblet slowly, letting the candlelight catch the rim and take a sip that tastes more of spice than grape. Around you, cushions shift, laughter softens, and the circle leans closer. This is the moment when masks fall, not the painted masks of the Great Hall, but the subtler ones worn on faces every day. One lady traces a fingertip along the rim of her cup, speaking lightly of loyalty, yet her eyes deliver the real message. Her family wants land confirmed. Another smiles at your jest about the bishop, but quickly slips into talk of her brother's need for a royal commission. Desire and politics weave tighter than the silks draped on the rafters. You know this rhythm by heart. Here, affection is a currency, and the exchange rate fluctuates with every whisper. Historians still argue whether royal intimacies were more political than personal. Was the king genuinely seduced, or simply negotiating in velvet? Tonight you sense how inseparable the two can be. Every touch is both a caress and a contract. Every laugh is both pleasure and persuasion. A companion leans close, placing a sugared almond between your fingers, daring you to taste. You oblige, biting down on the brittle shell. The sweetness lingers, cloying, yet pleasant. Quirky tidbit: medieval banquets often ended with candied spices, ginger, anise, cinnamon, believed to aid digestion and kindle desire. They were nicknamed comfits, a word echoing comfort. You smile wryly. Comfort indeed, though not purely of the stomach. The chamber grows warmer, candles dripping wax onto copper holders. Shadows ripple across the walls like painted figures come alive. Someone begins to hum, and soon the room sways with the tune, not as a performance but as a shared rhythm, an unspoken vow to forget daylight burdens. The jester, absent from this private circle, would have joked that the harp has been replaced by heartbeats. You recline against embroidered cushions, the robe sliding lower along your arm, and let the conversation fold around you like silk. A lady quotes a troubadour's verse: "Love is the fire that melts the crown." You chuckle, replying that if that is true, your goldsmith will have a very busy morning. The chamber laughs, the tension dissolving again into camaraderie. But beneath the jest lies truth. Crowns do melt in these moments. Authority softens, replaced by intimacy that cannot be measured in coin or decree. You are aware of it, the double edge, how closeness can bind loyalty more tightly than parchment, yet also loosen discipline if not handled carefully. The balance is yours to maintain, even as the wine loosens laughter further. A servant discreetly refreshes the goblets and slips away, careful not to disturb the spell. You lift yours in a small toast, to beauty and to honesty. May one always flatter the other. The words hang in the air, half earnest, half playful. They drink, smiling, each interpreting the toast in the way most useful to them. Scholarly debate for the night. Was courtly love ever truly practiced, or was it just the poetic wallpaper for gatherings like this? Some argue knights actually bound themselves to ladies with chivalric vows. Others insist it was all allegory, a literary game. Sitting here, you suspect the truth lies in between. The poems provide the script, but the players improvise when the candlelight burns low. The night deepens. The harp is set aside, cushions shift closer, and the whispers blur into laughter again. You feel the gravity of the moment, how politics has entwined itself with pleasure until neither can be untangled. Tomorrow's chroniclers may write of treaties, of decrees, of feasts, but the memory of tonight, the warmth, the laughter, the secret sealed in candlelight, will ripple unseen, shaping alliances in ways no parchment could predict. You set down your cup, fingers sticky with almond sugar, and look around at faces glowing with expectation. For now, the kingdom rests beyond the chamber walls. Here, you are not the king on a throne, but the center of a constellation. Every star orbiting, every light bending toward you, their warmth both solace and snare. The candles make small suns of themselves, but the corners of the chamber keep their secrets. You feel the room's temperature change not with heat, but with attention. The way glances sharpen, then soften, like blades slipping back into velvet. You've learned to read that weather. Behind the laughter, a draft, not from a window, but from a tapestry that billows a hair's breadth as if the woven nights on it are breathing. You rise, unhurried, and drift a few steps. The tapestry shows a stag hunt, antlers like bright branches, hounds with needle teeth. Your fingers graze the border and find what you expected. A gap, then cold stone, then a wooden frame with just enough give to hide an ear. In castles, tapestries are insulation for both chill and conscience. Mainstream fact for your midnight mind. Great halls and chambers were hung with arras not only for beauty, but to keep warmth in and carry drafts away. They also offered convenient curtains for whispers and watchers. You let the heavy cloth fall back. The room behind you murmurs. A smile ripples around the circle as if you've performed a trick. Perhaps you have. You return to the cushions and allow the conversation to flow again, but you keep one part of your attention anchored at the wall, listening for a sound that doesn't belong. A jeweled bracelet slips from a wrist and lands beside your goblet with the quiet authority of a coin on a table. The owner retrieves it with a laugh that is 2 heartbeats too bright. You file that away. Jealousy has the same perfume as orange blossom if you're not paying attention. Another companion praises the lady who just spoke. Her smile says, sister. Her eyes say, rival. You taste the almond sugar still on your fingers and think of ledgers, not the treasurers, but the invisible accounts people keep with one another. Historians still argue whether medieval courts ran on formalized espionage or on informal webs of servants, confessors, and companions trading news like spices. You suspect both. A kingdom rests on law. A court rests on rumors with good posture. The harp returns, quieter now, a hush with strings. A servant refills cups and overreaches, wine beads and trembles near the tapestry's hem. He freezes, then steadies the jug. You catch his eye and nod, a small mercy banked for later, because kindness travels faster than fear in corridors, no map records. Light joke 1. Besides, if every drop of wine spilled were treason, you'd have executed gravity by now. You turn to the nearest lady and ask, almost idly, how her uncle's levees fare. Her answer wanders through compliments like a pilgrim through chapels. The end of the path. She hopes for command closer to your capital. You smile, considering. Proximity to you is a currency with its own exchange rate. Expensive to grant, priceless to receive. Quirky tidbit for the candle hour. Letters were often secured by letter locking, folds and slits sealed in ingenious patterns so that breaking the wrong crease told on the reader. You have opened enough of them to know ambition prefers knots to sentences. Somewhere in the castle, a sealed missive is being turned in someone's hands like a worry stone. The tapestry stirs again, only a sigh, but you catch it. You let a joke bloom to cover the moment. You remark that tonight's hush is so complete, even the painted hounds on the wall have stopped barking. Light joke 2. If they start again, you'll have to license them. Laughter circles the room, soft as fur. You invite a change of game, riddles for favors. Not promises, only privileges. A dance chosen tomorrow, a petition heard sooner, a hawk flown from your glove at dawn. The prizes are small, but the way eyes kindle tells you the stakes are not. A riddle is asked, and the answer comes from the rival you least expected. Applause, genuine and reluctant at once. A thread between 2 houses loosens, another tightens. A faint scrape from behind the arras. You stand, this time with purpose, and walk to the wall. Your hand holds the tapestry steady, then lifts it just enough to reveal a sliver of wood. Whoever is about to sneeze, you say, velvet dry, should know we have plenty of napkins outside. A muffled cough, a hasty retreat, the whisper of boot leather fleeing down a service stair. The room exhales. You let the cloth fall and look amused instead of angry. Fear sharpens knives. Amusement blunts them. You resume your seat, the circle drawing closer by instinct. Danger, like cold, encourages people to huddle. A companion asks if you will punish the eavesdropper. You shrug, letting the question turn in the candlelight. Curiosity is a vice, you say, but it is also how scholars find stars. The room accepts that as both mercy and warning. Light joke 3. You add that the next spy must bring a better chair. Standing behind Eris is murder on the knees. A courier slides in through the side door with the smooth panic of a man bearing urgent news to a room that forbids urgency. He kneels, eyes down, and presents a letter buckled with red wax. You break the seal. The script is an old rival's, sweet at the edges, iron in the center. He hints at a meeting, suggests a marriage, threatens a tariff. You fold the letter once, twice, making no comment. The room watches your face as if it were the sky. You give them weather they can live with, mild, tempered, unreadable. Scholarly debate to tuck under your pillow. Some insist that behind the tapestry intrigue is a literary trope exaggerated by later playwrights. Others document actual passages and peepholes threaded through palaces. You have walked enough corridors to know that architecture is opinionated. It encourages certain meetings and muffles certain truths. The hour folds toward its quiet center. You let conversation meander to safer banks. Falconries, horses, the new consignment of pepper that smelled like a caravan's heartbeat. A companion recounts a story of a queen who kept a tame rook that stole rings and forced nobles to retrieve favors from a bird. You laugh, imagining your treasurer wrestling jewelry from a beak. Perhaps you should hire the rook for audits. The tapestry now is still. Whoever lurked has retreated to write a version of you made of shadow and guesswork. You let that happen. A king cannot control the ink outside his own chamber, only the tone inside it. You raise your goblet, not high like a proclamation, just enough for the circle to lean in. To warm rooms and cooler tempers, you murmur, and to the wisdom of thick cloth on cold nights. Cups touch. The sound is small and complete. For a span of breaths, you simply listen. The thin, contented hiss of candle wicks, the soft clink of a ring against glass, the sigh of silk shifting as someone resettles. Your day has been written in decrees. Your night is stitched in threads. Between them hangs the arras, and you, practiced hand on the fabric, decide when to lift it and when to let it fall. The chamber breathes differently now, slower and heavier, as though the walls themselves are drowsy from wine and perfume. Yet even in this warmth, you sense the chill of whispers forming just beyond the doors. Nothing in a medieval court stays hidden for long. Rumors are faster than horses, cheaper than silver, and more enduring than parchment. You sip from your goblet, already imagining how tonight will be repainted by tongues eager to gild shadows into scandal. A lady beside you laughs too brightly at a jest, and in that brightness you hear tomorrow's retelling. The king favored her above the rest. Across the cushions, another companion's glance lingers a heartbeat too long, and that pause will become gossip. She seeks to sway him with her eyes. You know these stories will escape the chamber before dawn, walking on the lips of servants, fluttering from the cloisters, spiraling through the city. Historians still argue whether courts thrived on rumor like bread, or whether rumor was an unfortunate parasite. You suspect both. Gossip was glue and poison, binding people together in conversation while eroding trust beneath. Tonight, you feel its presence even before the words are spoken. A jingle at the door interrupts the hush. Your herald enters with a small bow. He brings no decree, only a reminder that eyes are already watching. Your Majesty, he says carefully, the corridors are lively. You dismiss him with a nod, knowing his warning is less about noise and more about ears. Quirky tidbit. In some kingdoms, professional spies of the spoon were said to linger near kitchens and pantries, eavesdropping as nobles let secrets slip over stews. The line between servant and informant was thinner than a pie crust. You imagine tonight's kitchen abuzz, half the cooks arguing whether your laughter meant alliance or infatuation. You glance around the circle and remark, with wry humor, that history will probably record your evening as a tale of wild abandon, when in fact, you've mostly been nibbling almonds and trading riddles. Light joke 1. You add that if almonds counted as seduction, the grocers of the kingdom would be kings by now. The room erupts, relief spilling like wine, but the laughter cannot drown tomorrow. You know how stories will twist. The rival who lost at riddles will swear you plotted it. The companion whose bracelet fell will be rumored to have dropped more than jewelry. Whispers are ink spilled before quills touch parchment. A courtier leans in, asking if you fear what chroniclers will say. You shrug, replying that chroniclers are like cooks. Some oversalt, some overboil, but all claim to serve the truth. Light joke 2. At least when cooks ruin a dish, you can send it back. The courtier laughs nervously, unsure whether you've made a jest or a warning, perhaps both. The harp strikes a few soft notes, almost a lullaby, and the circle sways again toward ease. For a moment, it feels possible to forget the eyes beyond the walls. Yet you notice one companion whispering to another, too quietly, their hands cupped like birds hiding seeds. You pretend not to see, but you file it away. Seeds always sprout. Scholarly debate here. Some historians argue that kings welcomed rumor, using it to test loyalty, while others believe it weakened authority, eroding reverence with every exaggerated tale. You suspect rumor is like wine, too little, and the hall grows cold, too much, and it topples into chaos. Tonight, you try to pour just enough. You raise your cup once more, speaking lightly. If tomorrow's story must be told, let it be that we laughed, not that we quarreled. Light joke 3. You add, and if anyone insists otherwise, I'll have the tapestry testify on my behalf. The chamber ripples with laughter again. Though behind the mirth, everyone hears the truth. You control not the whispers themselves, but how you let them shape you. The candles have burned shorter. Their wax pools gleam like tiny mirrors. You catch your own reflection in one, blurred, flickering, both present and dissolving. That, you think, is what rumor makes of kings. Shadows reflected in liquid, always trembling, never still. You breathe deeply, reminding yourself that while whispers may shape tomorrow, tonight still belongs to you. The candles spit and sputter, as if nervous about the words that will soon circle through the air. You know the pattern by now. Where rumor drifts, sermons soon follow. And true enough, before the night's end, the priest arrives, summoned perhaps by conscience, or perhaps by ears too eager to carry tales back to him. He enters with a measured bow, robes swaying, a crucifix gleaming like judgment in metal form. You motion for him to sit, though he chooses to stand, as though proximity to your cushions might taint his vows. His voice begins soft, but gains steel. Your Majesty, the court speaks of indulgence, and the church must remind you that kings answer not only to men, but to God. His words are less about the evening itself, and more about authority, yours and his, meeting in the same candlelit circle. Historians still argue whether priests in royal courts were fearless guardians of morality or careful opportunists, tailoring sermons to the political winds. You've heard both types. Tonight, you hear a blend, sincerity gilded with strategy. He speaks of Solomon, whose wisdom was vast, but whose many wives became his stumbling stone. You smile faintly, wondering if the priest realizes he sounds jealous of biblical company. Your companions lower their eyes, though some hide smirks behind jeweled hands. You clear your throat and reply gently, thanking him for his care, acknowledging the weight of sin, but adding that kings must also keep morale in the court. Joy, too, is a tool of governance. Light. Joke 1. You quip that if laughter is sinful, then the devil surely has the best jester. A ripple of chuckles breaks the tension, though the priest only frowns deeper. Quirky tidbit. Confessionals in the Middle Ages were not always the wooden booths we imagine today. Often, they were simple benches or even public spaces where priests whispered advice. Secrecy was less about architecture and more about trust. Tonight, your chamber feels like a confessional turned inside out, your sins whispered by others before you even speak them yourself. The priest warns that indulgence weakens resolve, that too much velvet softens the steel required for kingship. You counter, gently but firmly, that even steel must be tempered, or it snaps. Historians debate whether such exchanges ever happened candidly, or whether kings stage them for effect. You know tonight is real enough, both of you circling the same truth, each unwilling to yield entirely. Light joke 2. You add that if heaven intends to strike you down, it will need to wait until after breakfast. Your cooks already began roasting swan. Even the priest exhales a reluctant laugh, though he hides it quickly behind a cough. Still, you recognize the danger. The church holds immense sway. Sermons delivered tomorrow could frame tonight as folly or forgiveness. You must tread carefully, weaving humor with deference. You promise to attend Mass at dawn, to show contrition, to remind both priest and court that your crown bends toward heaven even while it leans into cushions. The harp plays softly again, filling the silence left by your words. Your companions glance between you and the priest, waiting to see who bends. At last, he bows stiffly, mutters a blessing, and withdraws, robes brushing the floor like a broom sweeping up sins. The door closes, and the chamber exhales. You lean back, smiling wryly. Light joke 3. You murmur that if saints kept ledgers, you'd owe 3 rosaries, 5 Ave Marias, and a barrel of wine. Laughter returns, the warmth restored. Yet you know the priest's words will echo tomorrow, repeated with additions, embroidered with guilt. Scholarly debate to close the moment. Some chroniclers insist that priests saved kings from ruin by curbing their excess. Others argue they merely gave kings plausible deniability. I was warned, therefore I am wise. Tonight you wonder if history will call you wise or wayward. Either way, the night still belongs to you. The priest's blessing still hangs in the air like a bell's last vibration when another sound arrives. Silk against stone, measured and unmistakable. The door opens not to rumor, but to rank. Your queen enters with the composure of a tide, slow, inevitable, and impossible to ignore. Her ladies drift behind her like a constellation that never loses its star. You rise because you must, and because the room itself seems to stand when she does. Her gaze takes a slow census of faces and cushions, tallying loyalties the way a steward tallies grain. There is no tantrum, no scene. That would be beneath her and dangerous to you. Instead, she inclines her head, barely. The message fits inside that single inch. The crown has 2 halves tonight, and she is the half that remembers. Your companions adjust their smiles. One reaches for a goblet that has nothing left in it, as if thirst might explain her presence. Another finds sudden fascination with the embroidery on a cushion. The harp attempts a discreet trill and thinks better of it. You invite the queen to sit, and she does, at a careful distance that measures not feet but boundaries. Mainstream historical fact for your soft-lit ledger. Medieval queens kept their own households, revenues, and officers. In England, some even drew a surcharge called Queen's Gold from certain royal fines. A queen was not merely spouse, she was an institution. Her presence here is not a visit, it is an audit. She speaks first of neutral things. The convent that needs roof tiles, the winter stores, the ambassador from the north whose manners outpace his gifts. Only then do her eyes rest on the woman nearest your elbow. It is not a glare. It is a question that knows the answer. The room thins to silence. You feel the temperature change a single degree. Historians still argue whether queens wielded power mainly through intercession and patronage, soft pathways of mercy and favor, or whether some intervened directly, shaping policy in rooms that never expected their voices. You've seen both. Tonight, you witness a third method, the geometry of presence. Your queen sits, therefore plans shift. You ease the tension with a smile and a jest about the jester. Light joke 1. You say he threatened to compose a moral ballad, but you spared the court such suffering. Laughter surfaces, grateful for anything that isn't a duel of glances. The queen's mouth curves, politely. She did not come for jokes. A tray appears with conserves of quince and small wafers, because servants understand battles too. The queen takes one, breaks it neatly, and shares half with the lady who most needs a lifeline. A treaty in sugar. You admire the move, even as you recognize the price. What is offered gently can be reclaimed loudly. Quirky tidbit to tuck behind the heiress of your mind. Court's prized unicorn horn cups, really narwhal tusk, believed to neutralize poison. Some queens favored them at tense tables, a delicate way to say, I know where I sit. Tonight your queen drinks from plain silver, the stronger statement. She trusts her position more than a myth. She turns to you and asks about the coming progress through your southern shires. You answer evenly, noting bridges to be mended, parishes to be visited, oaths to be renewed. The subject is travel, the topic is supervision. Her ladies relax by degrees. Yours do not exist, formally. That is the etiquette of courts. Absence can be the most conspicuous presence. A cough of diplomacy comes from the doorway, the chamberlain with perfect timing and terrible luck, announcing that the Queen's almoner requests guidance on alms for widows of last winter's fevers. The Queen answers with crisp charity, naming sums and parishes faster than your treasurer balances columns. It is not only mercy, it is patronage, and every coin spends twice, once in bread, once in loyalty. She asks to hear the harp. The musician obeys, choosing a melody that belongs equally to chapel and chamber. Your queen listens, then quotes a saint about chastity with the same tone one uses to quote a weather report. You reply gently that saints also praised prudence, and prudence includes sleeping well. Light joke 2. You add that a rested king signs better laws and fewer regrettable charters. Even the Queen's most vigilant lady suppresses a smile. Your closest companion, too bold or too green, ventures a compliment about the Queen's bravery during last spring's plague scare. It is sincere and clever. It offers praise that does not sharpen. The Queen accepts it with a nod and in return asks the young woman about her father's harvest. A thread is tied. You can almost hear the knot cinch. Scholarly debate floats up like incense. Was the influence of royal mistresses corrosive or constitutive of governance? Chroniclers damned Alice Perrers for crowding England's courts in Edward III's waning years. Others praised Agnes Sorel for rallying Charles VII, and by some accounts, his armies. Historians still argue whether such women bent policy or merely decorated it. You have lived long enough to know that decoration can carry weight. Your queen shifts the conversation to lineage, dowries due, guardianships pending, marriages that will calm border lords. It is a queen's map, roots drawn in wombs and wills instead of roads. You answer carefully. This is her element, and her ladies record victories the way clerks record rents. The room begins to breathe again. You spread the pressure with hospitality. Music, then a brief prayer. You suggest, light joke 3. Lest the bishop think I am economizing on piety. The jest lands, the tension lowers, and even the stone seems to shrug. The harp swells, a psalm murmurs. Candles gutter and correct themselves. When the prayer ends, the Queen rises. She does not demand dispersal. she does something more elegant. She invites all to attend her morning devotions in the chapel, naming the hour as if naming the law. Attendance will be noticed. Absence will be a rumor with legs. She bows to you, exact and immaculate, and departs with her constellation intact. The door closes. The room exhales. Conversation resumes in a key one step lower, still warm, less reckless. You draw a breath that reaches your shoulders and sinks. No open quarrel, no public humiliation, no grievance sharp enough to nick the realm. The peace holds tonight, not by force, but by choreography. You raise your cup, now nearly empty, and consider refilling it or your self-control. Wisdom chooses the latter. The Queen has reminded you that the crown is not only a circle of gold, it is a ring of eyes. Tomorrow, those eyes will be in the chapel at dawn, and the story of this night will be edited by who kneels where. For now, you thank the musician, ask the servants to thin the candles, and guide the talk to safe banks, hawking routes, a new shipment of pepper, a poem so bad it might be treasonous. The ladies laugh, relief surfacing like bubbles in wine. The danger has not vanished, it has become polite. That is victory enough for a single hour. The Queen's footsteps fade into the echo of stone, and with them the chamber regains its pulse. Yet her presence lingers, like incense after Mass, sweet, heavy, impossible to ignore. You lean back against the cushions, your companions rearranging themselves, their laughter careful now, trimmed of its sharpest edges. But you know the game has only shifted rooms. If daylight was petitions and parchment, and dusk was indulgence in song, then this hour belongs to negotiation wrapped in silk. A young nobleman clears his throat, offering a jest about the priest's sermon earlier in the evening. His smile is broad, but his eyes carry intent. He is here on behalf of his house, and the joke is only the envelope for the letter he cannot write. The real message arrives soon enough. His sister, radiant and unmarried, has been delighted by your kindness. The words are innocent. The meaning is currency. Historians still argue whether bedchamber politics were exaggerated by scandal-hungry chroniclers or whether they genuinely forged alliances. The truth, as usual, likely sits in the middle. Some whispers became treaties, others dissolved into smoke. Tonight, however, you feel the truth pressing close. Every gesture here is a contract drafted in candlelight. One of your closest companions leans near, her voice low. She speaks of her family's borderlands, threatened by a rival who happens to be tied to one of your more stubborn vassals. A sign of your favor, she murmurs, would silence him. You hear not only her plea, but the echo of her father's. Desire here is braided with duty. Quirky tidbit. In Burgundy during the 15th century, records show mistresses receiving not only jewels, but also estates and official titles, effectively binding families to the duke's cause. The chroniclers might have condemned the intimacy, but the accountants recorded the land transfers without flinching. Politics, after all, has many doors. You sip wine to buy yourself time. The chamber has grown quieter, waiting for your reaction. You allow yourself a smile and reply that loyalty is its own dowry. The room exhales. The answer is artful enough to please without promising. Light joke 1. You add that if dowries were measured in compliments, tonight would already have bankrupted the treasury. Laughter flickers, thin but genuine. Another companion ventures a different tack. She praises your mercy in sparing a rival last year, adding that mercy breeds gratitude that endures longer than fear. Her hand brushes yours as if by accident, but her eyes insist otherwise. You recognize the maneuver, flattery aimed not at your pride, but at your conscience. She wagers that you'd rather be remembered as merciful than feared. She isn't wrong. A servant clears goblets and replaces them with warm, spiced mead. The sweetness coats your tongue, but the warmth runs deeper, softening the hard edges of decision. You make another jest. Light joke 2. You say that if politics were mead, you'd prefer it watered. Strong drink leads to strong regrets. The room chuckles, though one courtier murmurs that regrets are simply tomorrow's stories. You admire the honesty. The harpist strikes a playful tune, as if to mask the gravity creeping into the cushions. Yet the conversations circle back, inevitably, to land, titles, favors. A noble lady proposes that her son be made steward of a royal estate to serve your interests faithfully. You recall that her son is barely of age and once mistook a falcon for a goose. Still, promises whispered here are seldom about competence. They are about loyalty anchored through intimacy. Scholarly debate for your drifting mind. Some argue that intimacy blurred with politics diluted governance, distracting kings with personal bonds. Others insist it strengthened the throne, welding families to royal favor more securely than parchment could. You suspect both are true, depending on how steady the hand holding the goblet is. Light joke 3. You remark that if every petition tonight were written on parchment, the forest outside would be bald by morning. That earns you another ripple of laughter, and with it, the tension thins again. You study the faces before you. Each smile is soft, each hand relaxed, yet beneath them pulse dynasties calculating the worth of your glance. Pleasure is real, but politics is relentless. The two are no longer separate threads. They are one rope, binding you tighter with every toast, every laugh, every glance across candlelit cushions. You raise your goblet once more, not with grandeur, but with ease. Let us drink, you say, to favors wisely asked and wisely granted. It is a promise and a warning both, disguised as warmth. They drink with you, relief mingled with ambition, their eyes reflecting the flames that now burn lower, steadier, deeper. The night edges onward, weaving alliances that tomorrow will surface as laws, appointments, and marriages. Yet for now, in this chamber, they are only whispers softened by wine and sealed with the faint brush of hands. The politics of the bedchamber, half scandal, half statecraft, continue, and you remain at its center, smiling with the weight of knowing that nothing in this room is ever truly private. The candles bend lower, wax pooling like molten coins, and the hour tips toward its quiet heart. The chamber that earlier buzzed with riddles and laughter has slowed into a softer murmur. Cushions are drawn close, goblets stand half forgotten, and the harp rests silent in its case. You feel the night folding around you, less a stage now, and more a cocoon. You lean back, robe slack across your shoulders, the weight of the day finally easing. For a moment, you almost forget the petitions, the letters, the quarrels. Instead, you listen to the small sounds, a sigh, a rustle of silk, the gentle crackle of wick against wax. Power has its noise, hooves, horns, heralds. But here, influence hums in whispers. Historians still argue whether kings sought such nights for solace or for spectacle. Were these chambers havens of comfort, or were they designed to impress, another tool in the machinery of awe? You know the answer lies somewhere in between. Comfort is real. The cushions are soft. The voice is tender. But you also know that by morning, even this intimacy will be tallied into the ledger of loyalty. A companion's head rests against your arm. Her breath evens, the faintest rhythm, and you wonder if she has drifted into sleep. Another traces idle patterns on the rim of her cup, eyes heavy with both wine and weariness. The urgency of ambition has quieted. Politics may thrive in daylight, but night teaches patience. Even schemes must nap. Quirky tidbit: medieval castles sometimes kept watching chambers adjacent to bedrooms where attendants dozed lightly, ready if summoned. Privacy was never absolute. Even now, you know a guard waits beyond the heavy door, his ears pricked for trouble, his eyes drooping. Kings sleep, but kingdoms do not. You close your eyes briefly, letting darkness press against your lids. A fragment of the priest's sermon from earlier slips back to you. Indulgence weakens the soul. You half smile. Weakness perhaps, but also resilience. Without these moments, you would be nothing but iron. And iron, untempered, shatters. Light joke 1. You murmur that perhaps monks envy kings less for crowns than for cushions. A ripple of tired laughter answers, the kind that needs no effort. The chamber softens again into silence. The air is heavy with rose oil, and you breathe it in, wondering if this is what memory itself smells like. Sweet, cloying, difficult to separate from the present. You think of the queen, of her poised exit, of the way she commanded tomorrow by merely naming an hour. You think of the rivals, of the spies, of the tapestry that shifted, all threads leading here to this stillness. Another companion stirs, asking in a half-dream voice if tomorrow will be easier. You answer honestly, no. Tomorrow will bring letters, feasts, arguments, sermons. But tonight is its own reprieve. Light joke 2. You add that tomorrow's hardest battle will be against your cook's enthusiasm for goose. The room chuckles again, softer still. Scholarly debate rises in your mind like mist. Some chroniclers claimed kings never truly slept, always haunted by duty, while others wrote of monarchs who indulged so deeply they slept through crises. Historians still argue which portrait is true. You know the reality is stranger, that kings both never rest and always must, caught between vigilance and exhaustion. The last of the wine is sipped, goblets set aside. A servant enters briefly to snuff the farthest candles, leaving only a cluster near you, their flames swaying like tired dancers. The chamber dims, shadows curling around you like cloaks. Light joke 3. You whisper that if any of tonight's secrets escape, at least let the chroniclers remember that the harp was in tune. A few smiles bloom in the half-dark, then fade with the flames. At last, you ease onto the cushions, the room breathing with you. The night is no longer performance or negotiation. It is simply quiet, heavy with warmth and faint with rose. You allow yourself to drift, not into full sleep, not yet, but into that liminal space where even kings can forget crowns for a few breaths. The candles gutter lower, the chamber fades into hush. You close your eyes, the day behind, tomorrow waiting, and in between, this midnight quiet, neither mercy nor sin, only silence. Dawn presses a pale thumb against the shutters, and the room blurs from gold to gray. You wake not to trumpets, but to the soft arithmetic of consequences. Candles are stubs, cushions askew, goblets stranded like little shipwrecks. For a breath, you belong to the hush. Then the door hinge whispers, and the day collects you the way a tide collects driftwood. Inevitable, unceremonious, thorough. Attendants move with chapel-footed quiet. A ewer steams, linen descends over your shoulders. Fingers fasten what fatigue wants to ignore. The scent of rosemary water tries to persuade your eyes it's noon already. You sit, accept bread, sip watered wine, and feel the court's pulse begin its climb. What the night warmed, the morning must now reckon. The first reckoning is simple. Faces. Who stayed too late, who left too early, who was seen leaving through which door. You allow your chamberlain to recite names without comment, but you index each one against the map in your head. The young lord who joked bravely, he seeks a foothold. The widow who praised mercy, she wants a steward's seal for her son. The queen's measured entrance, a reminder that tomorrow begins at her hour. You nod once. The chamberlain's lips stop moving at exactly the point you intend. Mainstream fact to steady your pulse. The machinery that turns whispers into policy is paperwork. Petitions become letters patent. Seals meet wax. Writs ride in saddlebags. In England, clerks once notched tally sticks, split hazel rods recording sums owed, so that two matching halves could prove a debt without trusting a single man's memory. Governance is not romance. It is wood, wax, and witnesses. The chaplain arrives to collect you for the Queen's devotions. His eyebrows carry a sermon all on their own. You let him keep it. There will be real words enough at the chapel. As you walk, your own footsteps sound too loud. The castle wears dew and restraint. Even the hounds eye you with the calm of creatures who never worry about chronicles. Light joke 1. You scratch one behind the ear and mutter that if dogs ran courts, everyone would be fed and nobody would write letters. The hound grins as if voting aye. In the chapel, candles braid light with stone. The Queen kneels flanked by her ladies. You take your place a step behind and to the side, a chessboard courtesy that acknowledges 2 powers and 1 altar. Psalms murmur. Incense threads the air. You bow when you must, speak when custom requires, and study the congregation in the same heartbeat. Who sings, who watches, who counts instead of praise. Historians still argue whether such court devotions were acts of sincere piety or carefully staged tableaux of fidelity. Today, they are both, and useful either way. After the final amen, the Queen lifts her eyes just long enough to measure you and the room. She departs in a disciplined drift. Courtiers arrange themselves like filings around a magnet. A widow is directed toward alms via the Queen's almoner. A young knight gets a nod from a bishop that will bloom into dinner. The lady who laughed too brightly last night receives a gentle public kindness that trims rumor's claws. Your Queen edits the story of the night without touching a quill. Back in the solar, the reckoning shifts to coin and parchment. The treasurer brings ledgers and the chancellor brings wax. You sign confirmations that cost you nothing and grant the appearance of everything. You delay 3 requests that smell of haste. You reassign a stewardship from the Falcon Confuser to a cousin who can tell goose from hawk before breakfast. Light joke 2. You explain the change as avian literacy, and even the scribe smiles into his ink. A messenger arrives, powdered with road dust, kneels, and delivers the rival's letter you folded last night. Now, in daylight, its courtesies seem thinner, its tariff threat thicker. You draft a reply that praises his hospitality, ignores his timeline, and attaches a gift of pepper worth more than his flattery. Diplomacy is sometimes seasoning. The taste lingers even when the plate is cleared. Quirky tidbit. For heavy heads, some physicians recommended possets, warm milk curdled with ale or wine, spiced with nutmeg or ginger. Others swore by raw cabbage, which is a remedy and a dare. You decline both, choosing bread and watered wine and the older cure called responsibility. Petitions queue like pilgrims. The young nobleman from last night bows with exactly the right degree of humility, requests nothing for himself, and then stumbles accidentally into asking everything for his sister. You grant a courtesy that promises neither marriage nor title and looks like hope from 3 paces. He beams. Hope is cheaper than dowry and, if properly lit, just as brilliant. The rival houses whose bracelets and glances tangled behind tapestries must be soothed. You send a falcon with a silver jest to one, a hunting invitation to the other. You order a public reconciling entertainment, a pas d'armes, at the next fair, where clashing lances will translate last night's geometry into daylight spectacle. Historians still argue whether such pageants relieved tensions or rehearsed them for real war. You prefer rehearsals that end with applause. By midday, the ledger of consequences looks almost elegant. The Queen's devotions have cooled the floor. Your letters have salted the borders. Last night's laughter has been converted into 3 minor appointments, 1 graceful delay, and a rumor that now walks with a limp. You eat bread dipped in broth and allow yourself the smallest exhale. Then comes the scrap no one predicted. A servant confesses that a groom bragged in the stables about who sat nearest to you on the cushions. You could turn this into a cudgel, make an example, hang the gossip by his own tongue. Instead, You fine him a week's wages and task him to deliver bread to the poor at the gate, where every mouth will learn generosity is louder than rumor. Light joke 3. You add that if he must boast, he may boast about loaves. Laughter rustles. The lesson lands. Scholarly debate to stack neatly beside the wax seals. Did intimacy in the royal orbit corrode discipline or weave firmer bonds? Your morning answers itself. It depends on what you do next. Nights can tangle, mornings can comb. You have combed. One last order. The tapestry from the chamber, that alert, breathing heiress, will be rehung in a different corridor. Let it listen to drafts, not secrets, for a season. And let the court notice the change without comment. Architecture, like rumor, can be steered. By late afternoon, the sun finds your window, glancing off the crown resting on its cushion. You do not put it on. You do not need to. The crown is already everywhere, in letters and glances, in chapel schedules and almoner lists, in tally notches and the measured distance you kept while granting favors. The night wrote invitations. Morning has written terms. You stand, stretch the stiffness from your shoulders, and look toward the yard where hawks blink like solemn judges on their perches. Tomorrow will bring more petitions, more dinners, more verses about virtue tripping over fortune's hem. But today, the reckoning holds. The realm is quiet enough to hum, and your name, for the moment, tastes of bread rather than rumor. The afternoon settles into a brass-tinged quiet, and you stand at the window where the light lays its careful geometry across the stone. Below, the yard turns, patient as a mill wheel. Grooms leading horses, a boy chasing a hat that has decided to become a kite, laundry snapping its little flags of surrender to the wind. You watch it all and understand that your reign will be remembered less by what you intended and more by what the world found easy to retell. Stories survive because they fit into mouths. You turn from the window to the table where a clerk has stacked fresh parchment. He asks whether you'll commission a chronicle. It is a trap disguised as parchment. If you do, you buy praise that ages like fruit. If you don't, you let enemies string your life on their own thread. Mainstream historical fact to steady your choice. Many medieval kings paid court historians, chroniclers, or poets to shape memory, from Capetian France to Plantagenet England. You think of how those pages sparkle at feasts and smolder in monasteries later, waiting for some distant scholar to underline you with a frown. The clerk clears his throat. Your Majesty. You wave him away for now, gentler than the motion feels. A chronicle can wait one breath longer while you decide if you are commissioning a mirror or a mask. You pace. The tapestry in this room shows saints and lilies. The heiress does not stir. No eavesdropper breathes behind it. It makes you almost nostalgic for last night's stag with its nervous hounds. Memory is a house with many rooms and very few locks. Quirky tidbit to pin in a margin. Illuminated manuscripts sometimes hid jokes. Knights battling snails, rabbits brandishing swords, drolleries that wink at posterity from the page's edge. Even monks could not resist telling two stories at once. A messenger brings a list, the morning's alms carried to the gate, the falcon gift delivered, the hunting invitation accepted. Your edits to last night are already becoming daylight. Historians still argue whether such soft corrections counted as statesmanship or stagecraft. Perhaps they were both. You have learned that a rumor is best managed with a loaf of bread and a new appointment. Archives remember seals, people remember gestures. The Queen returns, not in person now, but in effect. Her almoner reports the chapel attendants and who wept, genuinely or wisely, during prayers. You take the parchment, scan the names, and feel the ledger of the night tilt one final time toward equilibrium. It is a relief that tastes like water. Light joke 1. You tell the almoner you are grateful the statues did not yawn. The poor man nearly crosses himself for laughing. You sit and let your hand find the edge of the crown lying on its cushion. In the metal you see a blur of yourself, a king, or a rumor of one. The harp in the corner rests like a tethered bird, its strings asleep. You touch one lightly. The room answers with a single gold thread of sound. The note hangs, then ghosts away. That, you think, is what the night will become, a tone someone swears they heard. The clerk returns with a draft preface, honeyed sentences about your justice, your mercy, your victories. He writes as if he's carving a statue of you from butter, impressive until the hall gets warm. You suggest he include the mills you rebuilt, the river toll you lowered, the winter stores the Queen managed. He blinks as if practicality were scandal. You insist. Kings are not only pageants, they are repairs. Scholarly debate to tie to your sleeve. When chroniclers linger on libertine courts, are they capturing the center or the fringe? Some argue the bedchamber bent policy. Others claim it was a glittering eddy beside the main current of taxation, justice, and war. Historians still argue whether your nights are the story or just its most replayable scene. You smile at the thought that posterity may file you under comfits and consequences. Light joke, too. You remark to the scribe that if he must gild anything, let him gild the truth. Gold leaf on a sausage does not make it a peacock. He snorts ink, horrified at himself. You forgive him on the theological grounds of excellent comic timing. A courier arrives, bearing a letter folded with elaborate letter locking. You admire the clever slits and tuck, then break them anyway. The rival's reply is civil and evasive. Pepper accomplished what parchment could not. You draft 3 lines that sound like gratitude and behave like delay. Diplomacy's favorite posture is a bow that never quite finishes. Evening begins its slow rehearsal outside your window. The light goes soft and marmalade at the edges. The yard's noise becomes woolly, as if someone put felt over the day. You let your mind walk the corridors backward, the great hall with its sugar castles, the private chamber turned parliament of cushions, the tapestry, alive, alert, the queen's gaze, the priest's warning, the jester's knife-juggling confidence, the rook stealing rings in that story you liked. Remember the posset you refused, the tally sticks you preferred, the almost spilled wine that did not become treason, the dog who voted for bread. Each detail a bead. Your job is to thread them. You think of tombs, the gisants where kings and queens lie carved in stone, hands folded, eyelids closed, a lion or hound at their feet to prove courage or fidelity. Those statues look like sleep without rumor. No sugar, no snails with lances, no heiress breathing like a patient. One day, a stone you will not supervise will say what you were. Light joke. 3. You hope the sculptor understands your nose better than your portraitist did last spring. The court laughed then, and it laughs again now, softer and kinder than the first time. You return to the window for the last of the daylight. You picture a monk a century hence copying your name with chill fingers. A poet 2 centuries after still humming a verse about a mask. A scholar 5 centuries on arguing that you either saved the realm with mercy or ruined it with marzipan. Perhaps all 3 can be true, depending on which page someone turns. The harp string you plucked a moment ago has forgotten you. That is the lesson. Nights glow, then dim. Bread disappears and becomes strength. Kisses become marriages or mistakes. Decrees become customs and later curiosities. Memory keeps what is useful, spectacle what is beautiful, and rumor what is easy. If you must be remembered, be useful and a little beautiful. Leave rumor nothing to stand on but envy. You lift the crown, not to wear it, but to feel its weight, the honest weight that no candlelight can sweeten. Then you set it down, sign 2 writs, call for bread to be given at the gate, and ask the musician to tune the harp for tomorrow. Let posterity choose its page. Tonight, you will choose your bed and, for once, sleep. The castle is quiet now, the kind of quiet that feels like it has been earned. The last duties have been inked, the last courtiers sent to their chambers, and the crown rests where it should, on a cushion, not your head. You sit for a long while with only the faint crackle of the hearth for company, the fire shrinking into embers that glow like tired eyes. The night has its own rhythm, slower, longer, stretching thoughts into softer shapes. You breathe more deeply, letting the stiffness of the day ease from your shoulders. Every sound grows tender, the sigh of wind through the arrow slits, the low shuffle of a guard changing post, the muted hoot of an owl far beyond the courtyard. Even the stones seem to exhale. You feel the weight of history loosening, no longer a chain, but a blanket, heavy enough to comfort, light enough to allow rest. You remind yourself gently that tomorrow will come with all its noise, petitions, letters, smiles that mean bargains, sermons that mean judgment. But not yet. Tonight, the kingdom asks nothing. Tonight, the ledger closes and the ink dries. You allow yourself to drift into a softer register, where memory turns to mist and worries to shadows without edges. If chroniclers argue tomorrow, let them. If rumors twist, let them. The chamber is yours now, the silence loyal only to you. You stretch out on the cushions, eyes half closed, listening not to harp strings or whispered pleas, but to your own breath, steady and calm. For the first time in many hours, you are neither ruler nor negotiator. You are simply a figure in candlelight, waiting for sleep to claim you gently. The embers fade, and the castle fades with them, until all that remains is the slow rhythm of breath, the soft hush of stone, and the certainty that for this moment, peace belongs to you.